Because once you understand how power actually works, you will be able to see things objectively for what they actually are. Like, take for example, now we have a story that just came out about Neil Druckmann saying that there's not going to be a Last of Us 3, right? Let me read it to you. Don't bet on The Last of Us Part 3 ever happening, says Naughty Dog studio head Neil Druckmann. It's been a lingering question whether Naughty Dog would follow up 2020's acclaimed The Last of Us Part 2 with another sequel. And in an interview with Variety, Druckmann gave us our clearest answer yet. No, probably not. I was waiting for this question, Druckmann said. I guess the only thing I would say is don't bet on there being more of Last of Us. This could be it. So as a power analyst, you look at these stories and you go, yeah, I see what's actually happening here, but what is the reason behind this thing? This is when you have to dig deeper and expose the power structures that are at work behind the scenes. And you need to start asking the right question. Like, for example, Neil Druckmann, was this his choice or was he forced into it? Because once you understand the power structures at play here, you will see that Neil Druckmann is both a victim and an enforcer of the system. But this whole thing, it's bigger than just Neil Druckmann. You know, this reminds me exactly of what Ortega and Gasset was talking about in his book, The Revolt of the Masses, which, for those of you that are interested in doing your own solo leveling side quest, I implore you to take a look at the book, The Revolt of the Masses by Ortega and Gasset. It will boost your power analytical skills by 100 points. Now, in this book, Ortega and Gasset talk about what is known as the mass man. Now, what is the mass man? The mass man is the mindset. He is entitled. He believes that the world owes him something. It owes him validation. It owes him success and comfort. The mass man is skinless. He lacks resilience, takes offense easily, and demands cultural shifts to protect his feelings. Number 3, he's a conformist, doesn't create nor innovate, just follows trends and destroys what he inherits. Number 4, the mass man hates the past. He despises tradition and excellence because it reminds him of his own mediocrity. Number 6, he fears struggle, avoids real challenges, preferring safe, sanitized, prepackaged victories. And number 7, he controls everything through victimhood. Everything is framed in terms of oppression in order to justify his demands. Now, here's the real question, my fellow analysts. Does this sound like Neil Druckmann? We need to break this down. Now, I understand that as much as we may despise Neil Druckmann for all that he stands for, as power analysts, it's our job to make sure that we are objective as we possibly can be, so that we can get to the heart of the matter and expose the truth. So in order to really crack open this Pandora's box of discussion that we're talking about today as to why The Last of Us 3 is cancelled, we need to be fair with our assessments here and understand Neil Druckmann's role in all of this. That involves understanding the things that he could control and the things that he cannot control. Let's start with the things that Neil Druckmann cannot control. First off, Neil Druckmann is the co-president of Naughty Dog Studios, but he doesn't own the company. Naughty Dog is a subsidiary of Sony Interactive Entertainment. Sony controls the funding and the marketing. Now, we know that these studios are policed by HR and DEI officers, right? They control the hiring and the firing, which affects the studio's overall talent pool. They also do sensitivity reviews, meaning that scripts must pass inclusion checklists before approval. And then, of course, we have marketing and PR controls. That is Sony's domain. Sony's PR teams decide how the game is positioned in the media. So yes, Neil Druckmann has limitations. So now let's check out the things that he can control. Now, despite these constraints, Neil Druckmann still had significant major creative control, and he used it to push ideology. He personally approved the story of The Last of Us 2. He scrapped Amy Hennig's original work on Uncharted 4 and rewrote it in his vision along with Bruce Straley. He framed Nathan Drake as more of a problematic and more self-critical protagonist. Look, don't get me wrong, Uncharted 4 was an awesome game, no doubt about it. But looking back at Uncharted 4, I can still trace the Neil Druckmann fingertips or fingerprints in the game. Like, for example, to this day, the Nadine Ross boss fight in the earlier sections of the game still leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. Now, I know what the critics are gonna say, but I under. Nathan Drake was rusty. He was out of the game for who knows how many years. Nadine Ross is a trained mercenary, not just a brawler. The scene, Ayanda, was designed to show Nathan Drake's struggles, not to emasculate him. That's a fair criticism, no doubt. But then the thing is, my man Nathan Drake doesn't even get to land a single hit on Nadine Ross in that earlier boss fight. That's the first thing. The second thing is, Nadine easily dominates him, despite the fact that Nathan Drake has taken on armadas and armies and he's taken them all by himself. Years of fighting experience just whoosh in the dust. I mean, guys, even if she's an elite mercenary, Nathan Drake has fought and defeated entire militias before. The framing makes it feel as a girl boss moment rather than an earned victory. Now, does this mean that Druckmann definitively weakened Drake in order to push an agenda? Not necessarily. But given his track record with The Last of Us 2, I think it's fair to question whether this was just an action scene or a subtle ideological decision. Not to mention that in the original script, there was no Nadine Ross. Go figure. And the other thing I can't help but notice is that Nathan Drake is framed as a problematic and more self-critical protagonist. Amy Hennig's adventure was about charm and heroism and adventure. But in Druckmann's vision, Nate is more or less depicted as a man that's running away from his sin. The game focuses heavily on his guilt for lying, stealing, and being a bad husband. The framing isn't Drake is a hero with flaws. It's that his flaws are what define him. Now, is this a total subversion? No. But Druckmann subtly shifts the narrative from heroic adventurer to problematic man making amends. And the other things that were within Druckmann's control was that he doubled down on identity politics over storytelling. And we saw that with The Last of Us 2. He didn't have to do it in that way. Even if, let's say, for example, we know that the Hanania framework, right, is the one that discusses how companies and corporations are legally constrained by disparate impact theory and DEI mandates and laws, right? Even if that's the case, even if companies are forced to implement DEI practices in their games and in their product, if you are a skilled writer, there's a way that you can incorporate these themes in an organic way that doesn't take away from the narrative, but complements it and makes it even a better thing. But that's not what we saw from Druckmann. Druckmann publicly dismissed fan backlash and labeled honest fans toxic, which I'm sure you guys know by now is one of the methods that the elite class use in order to protect themselves from criticism. So you see, Druckmann wasn't forced into these decisions. He actively embraced them. This is why, according to my analysis, he isn't a victim of the system. He's a part of the mass man problem. Now, I know some of you eagle-eyed power analysts are out there asking right now, but Ayanda, weren't you the one who was telling us that these companies under the Hanania framework are legally obligated to enforce DEI practices by law? And now you're telling us that the reason as to why gaming is failing is because of The Mass Man by Ortega and Gasset. So, which is it exactly? Do these companies and creatives have agency or do they not? Okay, here's the thing. The companies have a level of agency. For example, like I said before, the Hanania framework, which we discussed earlier, has to do with the legal implications and constraints that are imposed and enforced within companies. So companies have to follow these DEI laws and mandates, disparate impact theory and the like. And then we also discussed the technocrats, right? The managerial class, the ones that don't own anything but control everything, right? So those guys are the elites, the ones that benefit from DEI and things of that nature, that help them to consolidate power. And now another piece of the puzzle is the idea of The Mass Man by Ortega and Gasset. He explains cultural decay, how the mass man also has a duty to shape entertainment according to what he sees fit. This is basically the full picture of the power structure that we're talking about here. And they're not contradictory, but they are rather complementary. If Hanania focuses on companies being legally required to push DEI, then Ortega and Gasset focuses on the agency that the individuals within those companies have towards pushing these things. Like we already discussed, that Neil Druckmann has agency. There are things that he can do and there are things that he cannot do. So let's dive deeper and analyze Druckmann's role in this power structure. Now, the conclusion that I've come to as to why Neil Druckmann isn't making The Last of Us 3 is because he is a fraud. It's not because of creative burnout or moving on to new things. It's because Neil Druckmann knows that he cannot fill the shoes of Amy Hennig and Bruce Straley. Amy Hennig and Bruce Straley are the creative powerhouses behind Naughty Dog's success. Amy Hennig was one of the lead creative powerhouses in the company. She's behind the Uncharted franchise 1 to 3. She's known for tight cinematic storytelling with strong character arcs. She left Naughty Dog in 2014 under suspicious circumstances, after which Druckmann and Straley took over Uncharted 4. Bruce Straley is a cohesive gameplay director. and Druckmann's key collaborator. Co-directed Uncharted 2, Last of Us Part 1, and Uncharted 4. He had a strong focus on gameplay design, pacing, and player agency. He left Naughty Dog in 2017, reportedly frustrated with the studio's direction at the time. Later, it was revealed that he wasn't properly credited for his work in The Last of Us Part 1 remake, hinting at bad blood between him and Druckmann. So what happens when Druckmann loses both of these creative juggernauts? Well, we saw the result, and that was Last of Us 2. Druckmann is a fraud. When Druckmann worked with Bruce Straley, he made masterpieces. Uncharted 2, The Last of Us Part 1. When he took full control of The Last of Us 2, he prioritized ideology over storytelling. Without Hennig's tight narratives and Bruce Straley's gameplay expertise, Druckmann just couldn't deliver a masterpiece of his own. And according to me, I may be wrong, but that is why he is not making Last of Us 3. Not because he's done with it, but simply because he knows that he cannot